I never gave up. There were times that I could have given up and probably should have given up, but I just refused to give up. I had to sell a car at one point to make rent. Um, there were other times
Mm.
when, we'd spend a bunch of money to make an investment and it wouldn't fly soon enough. Heavy use of a line of credit, which terrified me. Um, we eventually worked through all of those, but basically I just refused to give up. And that's the thing I'm probably most proud of.
Welcome to Your Next Big Project is You, a podcast based around the theme of time. Time to be able to press pause on life. Time to reevaluate what's important. Time to reminisce about where you've come from, what you've learned, and what you've accomplished. Time to revisit your goals, dreams, and vision. And time to remember the people in your life. That's it, my friends. If you've got time, fasten your seatbelt and listen in as we discuss opportunities for the next 5 to 25 years of your life. And remember, your next big project is you. Welcome to our podcast. Your next big project is you. And I have a special guest today, an old friend. My gosh, who would have thought, saying old friend 30 years ago almost. Nick Miller's joining me from the Boston area, owner, founder of Clarity Advantage. And man, I'm so proud to know Nick, and what a great interview we're going to have today. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Leo. Good to see you.
It was amazing meeting you almost 30 years ago. I remember we were involved in a competitive simulation at the time. I said, man, this guy is super competitive. I thought I was competitive, and that this guy is owning the room right now. And wasn't until I think we took a walk and maybe even played a round of golf, and as I got to know you and just started realizing your history and your success and what you've done. I was thinking about this and just looking at some of the things that you've accomplished, Nick. Over 100 articles that have been written for small business and for banking in the world that you serve, over 1,100 weekly sales thoughts, your columns that I've thoroughly enjoyed reading over the last number of years.
Thank you.
It amazed me to know that I'm here part of the year here in Arizona and talking to one of our good friends and mentors who said, oh yeah, Nick's in town, that you've been, scripted and acted in dozens of videos and sales skills and techniques. And many times on some of those trips here in other parts of North America, I'm assuming that you were MC at the annual American Bankers Small Business Banking Conference.
Many years, yep.
These accolades and these accomplishments, in that through Clarity, you've been able to reach and impact the businesses. And I'm sure in many places, Nick, the lives of bankers who've gone through your methods and your sales skills over the last number of years, over 30,000 folks. I mean, that's quite a legacy, my friend. But what caught me was this: is in those walks, in those ongoing conversations over the years, I said, "There's another guy inside of this guy. I think this Bon Jovi or Bono, or I thought you were going to be a professional musician and singer and performer and things. And what went off the rails, buddy?"
I was toward the end of my college career, Leo. I'd performed starting from the age of about 12 and had developed at a time when folk music and folk pop music was very popular. And I got to be a senior in college and was playing at a bar, and some representatives of a then, well-known but probably second-level band came through and said, hey, we need a guitar player and singer. Do you want to go? We're headed to Tokyo. And so there was some fairly heavy parental intervention at that point. And I also had landed a job with a bank in Chicago and lined up an MBA program. And I think I realized at that point the life of a touring musician was probably not the best choice for me. So I said no. I took a week to say no. I said no, and no regrets.
I loved the comment you just said about parental advisement, or some choice words, I'm sure, for mom and dad passed back then, if you think about it.
It was like the battleship Missouri sitting offshore shelling the base. I mean, it was fairly clearly directive.
Wow. So 18 years, Nick, think about this, leaving that potential dream at the time to starting your own business. You got these 18 years in the banking world to thinking about this, what happened that led you to start your business and the important decisions that you made to say, hey, mom and dad maybe gave me some advice years ago about the risk in my life. But right now you're old enough, mature enough, and seasoned enough to look at your wife and say, it's time for me to make a decision. It's time for me to take a risk. Tell us about that journey.
There were a couple of things that were important there. So I worked at the bank for 3 years and did an MBA at night. I really wanted to be in consulting. I felt that in my gut, and I had a chance when a friend left his position at what was then called Touche Ross and Company, and I was able to land in his chair. Figured out pretty quickly that being a partner or a manager in a big eight accounting firm wasn't what I had in mind for my life. Made a deal with one of the partners. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to go to California." He said, "Okay, I'll get you to California, but you got to do a couple of things for me first." One of which was spending a winter in Des Moines, Iowa, doing a management audit of an electric utility. That was a steep price to pay, Leo. Um, and so I got to California. The engagement was over. I didn't want to leave California. I had a girlfriend there. I loved California. And so I responded to, I was working for a client, the California Energy Commission, and they offered me a position. So I took it and ended up staying there a couple of years, developed an electricity price forecasting model for the state of California, did some other pretty nuts stuff. And then saw a 1-inch ad in the Wall Street Journal for Omega Performance Corporation, which was at that point a very young training firm in the banking industry. And I thought, well, that's a lark. Who trains in the banking industry? But I met them. They were guys just a little older than me. I liked them. We got along. So I went to Omega and stayed there 13 years. It was very interesting. I did consulting, training design, and so on, but I learned to develop product. Omega was a product sales company primarily. So I learned how to develop packaged training programs and help clients implement them. And there just came a time when I just didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. Omega was a wonderful place to work. I'm still in touch and friends with the guys that hired me there. Um, but there just came a time when I wanted the artistic freedom to do what I thought needed to be done, to design other programs, to work with clients in a different way. And I identified a gap. I mean, one of the common gaps was that we'd see clients have good strategies, but they didn't get translated well to what people on the street were supposed to do. It was like this pixie dust mentality. Well, we'll tell them what we want them to do, and we'll give them this little bit of training, and then it's up to them. Sort of the we're all adults here model. I just thought that's crazy. That doesn't work. So I called my company Clarity because the idea was to translate strategy to what people on the street were supposed to do. Advantage I added to the name because when I started the company, I aligned with your friend and mine, John Hoskins, who had started Advantage Performance Group. And so my first year or so with Clarity was really Clarity Advantage, representing Advantage's products and services and starting out that way.
Wow. I love the the integration of how it started from understanding the gaps to strategy to the essence of clarity and then the advantage of bringing it all together. But the clarity model, as I understand it, Nick, and the focus evolved over time. Tell us more about that.
So I started out representing Advantage's wonderful products that they were a VAR in the training industry. And I remember I was bidding a project at one point, and so I was doing custom development work for clients rather than selling products. So I went from Advantage products to doing custom development work for people. And I was bidding a big project for a bank here in New England, and I happened to have started a conversation with Alan Weiss, who's a very well-known consultant and coach in the professional services business. And I told him what I was up to. He says, "Why are you doing that? You know how to develop product. Why don't you develop your own product and sell it? Why are you selling anybody else's products?" So I thought about that for a little while, and that was really the next phase. I said, "Okay, well, that's right." So I started developing my own product. Over after a couple of years, I hired a couple of salespeople, and we really started to grow. So, the first stage was being a distributor. The second was being a custom developer of training, and then the third was really starting what is Clarity today, which is a combination of the two, custom development and wonderful products.
And yet you focus on small business banking to attract and develop relationships with owner managed companies. small business banking as it evolved. Why did you end up focusing there? I'm curious. What made that attractive to you, and how did that turn into success over the years?
Yep. Like many of the things that have happened in my life, it was just something that happened. It wasn't anything I'd planned. I took an engagement with a bank here in New England, and the design problem was, I've got a bunch of people calling on small businesses. It's too expensive the way they're doing it. It takes them 3 or 4 calls to really understand the full business. Can you figure out a way that they could do that in one meeting? Sure. So I did. I figured out a structure for a conversation that enabled a banker to cover what they would typically cover in 3 meetings in one meeting and
Wow.
leave with a roadmap to developing the relationship. And that idea then became the basis of our first product. But what happened at that point was I was running a small business. I saw the problems that small businesses had working with banks, and I saw the problems that the bankers had because they hadn't been trained properly. They didn't have the education really to understand how to talk to a business owner as opposed to a larger company. I was like, oh my goodness, and you just figured out a way to make that more efficient. Let's take that to market. So I had that idea, and then I went to maybe the first or second of a national conference called the Small Business Banking Conference, and ended up sitting next to a guy who said, "What do you do?" So I told him I accelerate banks' sales processes with small businesses. And he says, "I'd like to talk to you some more. We just set up a business banking unit at a pretty large bank. We need a sales process. Could you do that for us?" Absolutely. So that really was what leveraged it. I just a happenstance meeting at the back of a conference, 2 guys who were sort of half listening, and that turned into a relationship that was a 7-year relationship for us and really cemented our foundation in small business. And so while we did training and other work in consumer banking and other parts of banks, I really focused us on small business. And that turned out to be important strategically. I mean, it wasn't just random that we did this. It's like, oh my goodness, there's a huge opportunity in the market between the large training companies that just sell packaged programs that they don't customize and the banks trying to do it themselves. There's a niche here that a firm our size and with our capabilities could exploit. So I just said, look, that's the niche. That's what we're going to become expert in. That's what we're going to be known for. That's where our marketing, our selling, all of it is going to focus on small business because it's a growing part of the bank portfolio. It's going to be really important, and we're going to be the best at it. So I guess it was luck to some extent that I got a couple of projects, but then having seen the opportunity is like, oh my goodness, let's go. So that's what I did.
Well, you made your luck, buddy. And it's interesting because the name of your firm, Clarity Advantage, it starts with your own clarity in just the way you were able to articulate the own clarity around that's what we're going to do. These are the needs, and you got a twofold success metric here because one, you are one of those small business owners that these bankers needed to get in front of. So you bring the credibility already in terms of stepping in front of them and say, hey, I'm one of these folks you need to reach. And on top of that, from your years in banking with Omega and all the product development and the Alan Weiss consultation and stuff like that, say, heck, I can do this and we can build this this is what you folks need in order to turn 3 calls into 1. And so I could feel you're trying to help other people develop their clarity. It started with your own clarity from my perspective to do this. And what would really interest me was every week I would see in my email, there's a weekly sales thought from Nick Miller. And I'm thinking of all this culmination of your work and your ability, Nick, to me is a masterful storyteller.
Thank you.
And that's what weekly sales thought to me was. So what's Nick's story this week that I'm gonna, it might be just a few paragraphs, it might be a page or two, who knows? But I was always looking forward to your storytelling, and it really because it reinforced my passion around competing on the philosophies of value, about building relationships and asking better questions. Tell me how that took off. I mean, over 1,100 weekly sales thoughts. That alone is an amazing accomplishment. Tell us more about that journey.
Thank you. Well, when I was when Alan Weiss was working with me, one of the things he said was, you have to write. So I started writing articles. I started speaking at conferences, first in panel discussions, and then setting up panels and, really developing the conference frame. So writing and the conferences were two critical parts of our marketing strategy. And so I wrote a number of articles. Some were long. I mean, I wrote several articles that were 2,000 words plus, but I really found that I loved the short stuff. When I was in college, I took a course in Hemingway and really liked his short stories and thought, short is what I'm good at. So I started writing. And when I started, it was more teaching in the columns. I'd tell a story, but it was, 25% story, 75% teaching. And then one day I got an email from a guy in Los Angeles. His name is Dick. And he said, I've been reading your columns. You're a good storyteller. Stop teaching. And every week after that, he would write to me and say, stop teaching, tell your story. Stop teaching, tell your story. Stop teaching, tell your story. Dick, I can't. My audience is very tangible. They like concrete things. I can't stop teaching. Nick, stop teaching, tell your story. So over time, and Dick did that for about 2 years, it changed. And so I really began to focus on the story and just having the story tell whatever the lesson was. And I can't explain 1,100 of them. I mean, it's just a discipline. I sit down and I write. It takes me 2 to 2.5 hours each week to do it. And it's just like I don't want to do it this week. Forget that thought. Write the sales thought. As I learned at some point in Omega from a guy named Bill Snow, he said, if you're tired, you can write. If you're sick, you can write. If you don't want to, you can write. Just sit down and write. That's what I do.
I never asked you if you were a Seinfeld fan.
I never watched much television, so I've watched a little of Seinfeld, but not a fan.
Here's the reason why I say that. There was for those Seinfeld fans listening in on Nick's episode here today, there was a episode where George Costanza talking to Jerry, and they were wondering how they're going to write all these episodes every week. And he said, well, what did you do today? Well, I went to the store, we went to dinner, we did this. That's an episode. That's an episode. And Nick, you live life and you shared your stories in the same way brilliantly, because whether you went to a restaurant, whether you have somebody service something in your home, whether you're on a walk, I know all these different things out of nowhere. It's like, where did this one come from? Right. You just figured out a cool way to integrate your life and brought the concepts of value, relationships, and asking better questions around the way you lived your life. And the stories, there was natural. That's why whether you were tired or whether you were sick, because you just said, I got to get up and I got to do this. Well, what did I do this week? Or what happened to me? And that's pretty much the way I felt reading it's like, what the heck did Nick do last week?
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. I got to thank Dick for that. I wrote to him one week and said, I don't have anything to write about. And he wrote back and said, you need to get out more. And
that's right. That's exactly right. Well, why was it that in discussions with all the great sales training to these small business bankers trying to be more effective in front of entrepreneurs, small businesses like you or me, and the thousands of other ones out there that they were privileged to serve, you never thought of Clarity as a sales training company? Why was that, or what's your reasoning behind that?
Yeah, when I was with Omega, I had a lot of experience of people buying training and really not reinforcing it. And I hate that term. And I really came to see a concept that we share with our clients now, which is training is the last thing you should do. The things that come before training, the planning, the integration of internal systems, marketing support, tools for the lenders or bankers, tools for clients. I mean, all of the stuff that actually makes a sales process valuable for the buyer and doable for the seller. We would go into organizations and they're just buying training to check off a box. We need to do some sales training. We're putting out an RFP, which I eventually learned not to respond to. We need some sales training. And so we would say, well, great. Before people go to training, at least you need to have conversations with them about why they're going, what you expect of them, how they're going to apply it, and what you're going to do to follow up as their manager afterwards. Yeah, I got that. And then after the training, you got to meet with them, talk about the training, and then you got to set up time to observe and coach and all that. Oh, yeah, I got that. They'd never do it. So I really came to see clarity as a way of I'd say forcing or encouraging our clients to do the thinking. What's the value proposition? What does our sales process communicate to our clients and prospects? How do our different departments align to support it? How do we measure it? How much capacity do we have for coaching? Are we any good at coaching? All of those questions should be answered before you spend 10 or 20 or 50 or $100,000 on training for people. Otherwise, you're wasting it. And so when people say, well, we need some sales training, I say, fine. But the discussion that I want to have with them is really strategic. Who are your target clients? What's your value proposition? Oh, that's not clear. We got to work on that. What's your sales process? That's not clear either. We got to work on that. So there's all this stuff that we got to do before we get to training. Do you want to do that? Sometimes they say yes. Sometimes they say no. So when they do it, they get a good result. If they don't do it, they don't. It's very simple. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be viewed as a sales training firm because sales training firms to me is check a box as opposed to a sales performance improvement firm. And I don't use that term for us either. But that concept, it's really about you're buying training in order to get a result. Let's talk about how you get the result.
Yeah, cool. And that training that they bought built your reputation in small business banking to a amazing level of success to the point now that you're thinking about this next venture. But think about that focus and that reputation, that clarity advantage is built. What was most important to you about that? What the why within you in terms of that makes you proud about that journey? Tell me more about that, Nick. After some thinking about next steps in your career, we'll get there in a couple minutes, but tell me more about the reputation that you built and the significance of that.
Leo, when I started the business, I felt at the time I had no business starting a business. I'm really a designer. I mean, I'm an engineer, learning engineer, designer, somebody who thinks through problems, and I love solving the problems. Like how do you take three meetings and fold it into one? Or how do you take somebody who's oriented this way and move them that way? Or how do you help a bank change strategy? Those are the problems I like doing. I didn't consider myself a salesperson. I never had any management experience that was any good, at least. Um, so it's like, what are you doing starting a business? And so one part of it was because it's gonna living into starting a business is gonna ask me to grow in ways that I wouldn't otherwise. So it's a big mountain. I'm gonna climb it, and I'm gonna grow as a result of that. So that was one thing. Another was that I really saw a gap in the market that struck home with me, and that was that banks that was my target market, that banks were expecting their bankers to go out and the banks said, we want them to be trusted advisors. We want them to be, um, the third leg of the stool behind the lawyer and the accountant. And they just were not providing the support that they needed to do that. And because of some things in my background, that gap spoke to me. It's like you're sending people out to die. Basically, they're going to get shot down because a business owner is going to look at them and say, look, if you don't have any expertise, I don't need you. And with the digital age, that's just become even more pronounced. And so I went to war. It's like I want to take clarity and make a difference in how business owners are served by their banks and to give these people who haven't had the training or education, the opportunity to get a good business education, to understand how sales works, to really leverage their skills as people, to build relationships, to be curious. I mean, there was all of that. And I just had a really burning passion to figure out a way to do that efficiently and at large scale because there was a huge need. The banking industry was very product focused, and this was swimming upstream against it. And that seemed like a good challenge to take on. So
You
the
know,
writing that I've, go ahead, sorry.
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You weren't finished. Keep going.
Yeah, so the writing that I've done, the speaking that I've done, the products that we've developed have all integrated those elements together. Going through a Clarity program means you get some business education, some sales skills, some sales process, some relationship stuff, all in the service of giving you a value proposition that you could feel proud of to go out and talk to a business owner. I want you to feel confident. What we're really selling is confidence for people. We're helping them develop confidence by giving them some competence and some process that they can use. And that was tremendously important to me. There were times early in my career where I was sent out to meet with people that were senior managers in banks, and I just felt naked, absolutely naked, vulnerable, stupid, unprepared. Just didn't have the life experience or the knowledge to do it. And I thought, man, I want to change that for as many people as I can. I don't want people to live through that. So that became really the burning passion for me, and then for the people that I hired to come work with me, who were just terrific, all of them terrific, liked that mission, and off we went together.
Hmm.
It was quite a blast, maybe more than you asked for, but
You
that's
know,
that's where the passion lies.
isn't it funny, Nick, when you rewind your life, and here we are almost 30 years later, and I've shared a walk with you and a meal in Boston over the years, and we've been constantly, it feels like every 3 to 6 to 9 months, staying in touch with each other. Here we are all these years later, and this burning passion is so damn palpable, even at this level. As much as I thought I knew you, I didn't know you. Even at this level, years later, till we even having this conversation, even things I picked up at dinner and conversations over the years, it comes alive more. And it just makes me realize, by just being hopefully a good questioner and a good listener, and trying to understand more of this in this journey. But what did you enjoy most about the work and the journey?
I guess the people, I mean, the relationships that I had with clients and the people that I attracted to work at Clarity, just that's been the most fun. Developing those friendships. And I'm still friendly with clients that I had 25 years ago. So that that was really rewarding. It was for me, it was always more about the relationships than the money. The money's turned out to be good enough, but the relationships with the clients and my team members, absolutely first. And then I don't know, just solving the problems. One of the lessons I learned at Omega at one point was never name a product something that it isn't. And as I thought about Clarity services and products, we oriented them around solving particular problems, talking business with small business, selling more cash management and deposit services, generating big picture conversations. And so I would see a problem that a bank was having in its sales process, and I would develop a packaged learning experience to address that problem. Strategically, that was important because we were competing against much larger firms with deeper resources. And so the idea was we have to be a niche player where people can use our programs in addition to the others that they're using, so that we don't get blown out of the water by larger firms. And that strategy of having a niche specialty and becoming the expert in it, or one of the few experts, and defending it vigorously and promoting it vigorously, strategically turned out to be very important for us. And I'm really thrilled and proud that it did. And I think the fact that we eventually became recognized as an important connector and resource in the industry, somebody that you could call and say, I need this, or do you know somebody? And I could connect them and just be helpful. Building that capability, that network was, I liked getting called. It was fun. Hey, can you help me with this? Sure. I can't do that, but I can introduce you to somebody who can. That was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah.
um, it's largely people and solving problems.
Solving problems is a lot of fun. I'm curious, from maybe this analogy makes sense, as a wannabe musician and part of a touring band years ago, from the perspective of greatest hits. But what were some of your greatest hits, or things that you just mentioned the word proud, but when you think back of the things that gives you a smile in your heart and your soul right now, about some of the moments of pride when you're talking to your son and your daughter and your wife, what are some of those moments sitting on the porch in Cape Cod or something like this that you might be reflecting on?
I never gave up. There were times that I could have given up and probably should have given up, but I just refused to give up. I had to sell a car at one point to make rent. Um, there were other times
Mm.
when, you know, we'd spend a bunch of money to make an investment and it wouldn't fly soon enough. Heavy use of a line of credit, which terrified me. Um, we eventually worked through all of those, but basically I just refused to give up. And that's the thing I'm probably most proud of. Um, I'm very grateful to my wife who really didn't understand what it meant to marry a guy who'd eventually become a small business owner. And she did what, military wives and small business owners' wives or spouses do. She sucked it up. She largely raised the kids and took care of the house while I was doing my thing here. I'm grateful for that. And if I think about maybe one other thing that I'm proud of, I have sitting on my bookshelf several of the programs I've developed over time, which, in one case, 20 plus thousand people went through it. Um, I feel a lot of pride in that at Omega and then again at Clarity, I was able to devise a way that people saw immediately could be helpful and that they would use it. And that I was able to attract uh, some key people to Clarity to take that message to market and to get them to work together to make that happen. I mean, all of that sort of one long blur, but if I had to call out several things, that's what I would call out.
Two-part question for you here, buddy. What's Clarity's future then? And what's Nick's future?
Yeah. So after a really long discussion with our board and our chairman, I'm the lucky recipient of a grant of a sabbatical. Uh, I turned out to have all of those positions, but it took several years to convince me that it was the right thing to do. Um, so I'm going to withdraw from the business, or at least seriously ramp down from the business for a while. I don't know whether that's 6 months or a year. Clarity will continue on. We have clients. I have, team members who are going to continue on with serving those clients and delivering the training that we do. But I need a break to refresh myself and just to think more broadly about not only this industry, but other challenges that are in front of us, water, climate, other things that I'm thinking, I wonder where else I could apply my capability of communications and problem solving and so on to be of some help. So it's an exploration. I've gone on a couple of small boards and, just beginning to explore some other things while still working with clients at this point. But by the end of, certainly by the end of this year, I expect to be out and enjoying and exploring.
I'm still hearing a burning passion, yet a yearning to explore. And I'm curious, how did you know it was time? And what would you advise others based on your own experiences right now, the decisions you are doing your best looking in your mirror each morning, talking to your wife and trying to figure out the next decade or so of your life. So how'd you know it was time and what would you advise someone else?
When I was thinking about starting my business, I went in to talk to Carter Brown, who was president of Omega at that point, and I asked him, "How did you know? And what do you think it would tell me?" And Carter's response was, "You'll know it's time to start when you can't work for anybody else anymore."
Yeah.
And that turned out to be true for me. There was a day that I stepped off the elevator into Omega's offices and, took a deep breath getting off the elevator, and it just was like, I'm done. I gotta go. So that built up over a little bit of time. In my case now, it's something I've been aiming toward for several years. And um, I had a strategic decision to make a few years ago in terms of whether to invest to grow or not. And it turned out after I did the math and looked at all the factors that were involved in that, it didn't make sense for me financially. It was more of a risk than I was willing to take at that point in my life. So I gently started, downsizing the firm. I had at one point 10 full-time employees. It's like, okay, I think we have to start there. So just very gently, because I wanted everybody to have a good landing, just very gently started downsizing. Um, so we got to a certain, if this is like a plane landing, we went from 40,000 feet to about 10,000 feet. And I just was steady there for several years. Yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, I want to do it. But it just didn't seem like time. And then about a year ago, it was like stepping off the elevator. It's like, it's time. I can't explain why exactly at that moment, but it was just time. And what I would say to people, so what I can see the runway now. I got flaps down, the wheels are down. I'm not quite on the runway yet, but I know it's there. I can see it. I know when I'm going to land. And what I would say to others that are considering this, I guess, would be something that I read in an article at one point, which is whatever it is you want to do after or as you make the transition, start doing it before you make the transition. Build up the momentum so that as you shift out of one thing, you already have momentum built for something else, even if that's transitory. So that's what I've started to do. Uh, music has long been a passion. I've never really had enough time for it. I bought a new guitar for myself and I've started playing more. I've gotten involved on a nonprofit board here in Boston. Um, I've started a new regime in terms of functional wellness, just exercising, strengthening, dealing with body parts that aren't working so well anymore. Um, I have the pattern structured. That would be my number one piece of advice for people. Figure it out ahead of time. Start doing it now. Make the transition easy on yourself. And for those folks who get surprised, I would say expect you're going to be surprised. Always expect you're going to be surprised and have some things in the hopper, even if you feel really secure in your job. I went to see a dentist a week ago and she's about my age. And I said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to keep working." I said, "Why is that? You're really good at what you do, but why?" She said, "I don't have any hobbies. I don't have anything else." It's like, well, I do. And I've been working at them. So I'm sorry for her, but I think for me, that was the path.
Yeah.
A
One
lot of
final.
business owners, a lot of business owners don't have that. I mean, they say the business
No,
is all I've got.
true.
I don't have hobbies. I didn't pay enough attention to my family. I don't have friends. It's like, man, you missed the boat. I mean, I was really heavily loaded toward my business. My wife will quickly tell you that. But I coach soccer. I ran a soccer organization for 10 years. I continued to play the guitar. I have friends. I mean, I tried to keep the balance. And I think as you look at your sabbatical experience, for example, I think that's one of the things that I would hope people would learn from that is to how to rebalance for the new stage of life.
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue that poster board behind me and that oxygen
Staring me
mask.
right in the face. How could I miss it?
Like, how could you miss that? My God, come on. Was that a plant or what? Come on now.
It's a plant. That's a plant.
So, but seriously, when I hear you say words like gratitude for your wife and things like that, these are elements of that process that we're now calling the project you experience, because it's really about you. It's about Nick Miller right now going forward. And as you know, a lot of things that you've been talking to me about, this burning passion that still I believe is within you, it focuses on living a life with significance, which look at all the difference that you've made in the lives of Clarity Advantage clients and some of this other work that you've done, whether coaching soccer or doing things like this, about living life with no regrets. Think of the work, wanting to take your guitar on a trip and just go to some pub and play, that I know it's a burning desire within you as well. Living a life with abundance. You're thinking of your time and your talent and your treasure, of how you can best utilize that to continue to make a difference. The issue of gratitude, talking about your wife and children and things, having greater perspective now, these 30 plus years and all the work and people's lives that you've impacted and things like this. And then being the best version of yourself now. I know you're working on was it a Gershwin song or something like that? If I remember that right, you're being the best version and playing that guitar, and then ultimately not just leaving a legacy, but it's living it right now. Are there any one of those principles from significance to legacy that resonates with you more so than others?
Interestingly, the one I think I need to work on the most is abundance. Um, I have long operated from scarcity, and that has kept the fire burning and the hunger to go forward. Um, it's time to make that shift. So if I had one to work on, it would be abundance. I think the others that you've mentioned, I've done, more or less important, but I think the life of significance has probably been the one that was the biggest call to me. Being the best version of yourself would probably be up there.
Yeah.
I've looked for coaching. I've hired coaches. I mean, I've over time, whether it was physical training or mental training or skills training, I've used a lot of coaches in my life to help me get better, and I was able to translate what they shared with me to the clients that I work with. So, sort of a constant refeeding.
So that whole issue, Nick, is a good way to end on that. Let's just say abundance, because I reference that as intentional stewardship. And one of the things that the cohorts continue to tell me, it's easy to give our treasure. It's easy to cut a check and to give a few bucks here and there. It's more difficult to give your time
Right.
to a worthy cause. And I've always said, what are the things that touch your heart and your soul? And more importantly, the word we haven't used yet on this discussion is what I reference as pursuing joy. And what will give Nick Miller, what gives Leo and all the people listening more joy in our lives, and how can we pursue joy and live to be the best version of ourselves, so that we're living a life with no regrets and gratitude and all these things like that. But Nick, I just have to thank you for almost 3 decades of friendship.
It's
I
been
feel
great, Leo.
like a guy when people say, "Do you know Nick?" I said, "Yeah, I know Nick," but now I feel like I really know Nick even more so than I thought I knew Nick to do, because I've always known Nick is this, serious and smart and intelligent and amazingly successful and strategic thinking entrepreneur. And I know deep down there's a love for music and your family and things like this. But hearing this burning passion, this things that just make me smile of seeing how how difficult, when you said, I never gave up. I never gave up. I mean, I'm just thinking about similarities. I just want to thank you. And I'm sure all the people listening to this are going to take some gems out of this in your life story, your business journey of success, and now your continued fascination with becoming the best version of yourself and playing new songs and things like that. Thank you for your friendship, your partnership over the years, and being a role model and a mentor and a sounding board to me from time to time when I've called you up and said, "Hey, Nick, what would you do here?" More so than you might have realized. That's been really, really beneficial. And I value that over the years. I want to thank you for that publicly again. So all the best, my friend. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Leo. Bye bye.
Adios, my friend. Thank you.